Hello everyone, welcome to our Fair Isle Block of the Month. I hope you've been having fun with this. I hope you're all caught up and you have all of those beautiful Lemoyne stars made. Aren't they fabulous? Takes a lot of, but they're a little bit challenging, a little bit different to do, but the girls in class sure have been making beautiful stars. All their points look great. Everything is going along really well, and I hope it's going along really well for you too. This time we're going to do month 6 and month 7. You have a little bit of a reprieve from doing those Lemoyne stars, which is probably okay. So month 6 is super easy, super fast. Month 7 is a little bit more work, but really fun, and your blocks are going to turn out great. So for month 6, you're going to be making kind of half square triangles. So half square, yeah, they're kind of half square triangles. I don't know what she calls them. She calls them half left half hourglasses and right half hourglasses. So that's what these two are. They go together, and all you're doing is making 4 of these and 4 of these. I know, you can do it. It's amazing. That's all you have to do for month 6. That's why we're doing 2 months at the same time, because this you'll get done in no time flat. To do these 2 blocks, I used, to trim them down, my Quilt in a Day half square triangle ruler. She uses the Tucker Trimmer 3. So you can use either one, and I tell you how to use the Quilt in a Day half square triangle ruler to trim these down in the video later on. Okay, so this I found to be a little bit easier, fewer lines to look at and fewer things to have to try to figure out if you're on the right line or not. I found this just to be pretty straightforward, easy, and off I went. So that's why I used this ruler. You'll also be using your magic wand to do this. So your quilter's magic wand, it's a great tool to make half square triangles. So you'll be using this as well. So that is month 6. On to month 7. Month 7, you're going to be using the squared ruler, which I've lost. Here it is. Your squared ruler. First time we've used this? I think so. And it makes these beautiful square and a square blocks. So the first part of your block will be making this 4 patch, and then adding on the white outer border parts and squaring that up using the square and a squared ruler. So actually you make your 4 patch and you use the squared ruler to trim that down. And then you'll add the 4 corners and you'll use the ruler again to square those down. And you're going to be making 40 of these. So a few more, but I think it goes pretty fast because you can kind of strip piece all of this together as you go along. And of course, you're going to be strip piecing that center. So that will be very quick and easy to do. So let's get started. Let's talk about what you need to cut this month, and then we'll get to work. First thing you're going to do this month is your cutting. So I'm going to give you the cutting instructions for both months 6 and 7, because that way you'll be done cutting and you'll be ready to start sewing, which is really the most fun part, isn't it? So let's go through month 6. So month 6, you don't need too many things, and I think a couple of the blocks were left over from the month before, and hopefully you put them in a bag and labeled them so you're ready to go. But this month you will need fabric 14. You're going to need 2 5.5-inch squares of fabric 14 and 2 5.5-inch squares of fabric 17. I know, that's all you need. That's it. I told you you're going to get a little bit of a break this month, and you deserve it because you girls have been working hard on this project. So for month 6, all you need are 2 5.5-inch squares of 14 and 2 5.5-inch squares of 16, or number 17, I should say. Then for month 7, you're going to need 4 2.5-inch by width of fabric strips of fabric 12, 4 2.5-inch by width of fabric strips of fabric, oh, hello Marley, she was sharing the chair with me, of fabric 7, and I know, are you ready for this? I know Marley is. We need 160 little triangles cut out of 3¼ inch squares. So you're going to cut 80 3¼ inch squares, and then you're going to cut them in half diagonally to make 160 triangles. Joe is trying to lure Marley off of the table and off of the video with treats. Not working. So that's what you're going to cut. The instructions say to cut 2 1/8 inch strips. You can cut them at 2¼ 2½. Those are the easier numbers to cut with. And remember, you're always going to, oh, it might be working. You're going to cut these down anyway, so you should have plenty of fabric. So instead of 2 1/8, cut them at 2¼ or 2½, whatever you like to do. But 4 of each of these it's 12 and fabric 2 and 12 you're going to cut. And now she's got the thread, and okay, she's ready to sew. Here comes Joe. Yep, there goes my thread. Okay, get cutting, and Marley and I will see you in a few minutes. You've got all your cutting done, and now we're going to work on block number 6. The first thing we're going to do is make a couple of half square triangles. You're going to take your 2 5½ inch squares, the light one and then the dark one, lay them on top of one another, and I'll do this on this side so you can see it a little better. Then you're going to use your quilter's magic wand, and she has you draw, generally when I do a half square triangle, I will lay my quilter's magic wand from point to point and draw that center line, and then I stitch 1/4 inch from that center line. So you can do that. The other thing that she's telling you to do, if you look at the quilter's magic wand up close, you'll see a line that dissects that little wand right through the center. And on each side of that little line is 1/4 inch to the edge. So you can line up that center line from point to point on your block, and then mark that and stitch right on that line. So that's what she's suggesting that you do. So you're going to stitch on both of these lines just as I did here. So I stitched on both of the lines. They're 1/4 inch from the center of that block. Now I'm going to cut down the center of this, put my ruler from point to point, cut this, and then she's having you press toward the light side on each one of these. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to give this a nice press. Make sure it's nice and flat. And then I'm going to do this side as well. Always give your seam a little press flat before you flip it and press it. So you'll do that with both of those blocks. You'll end up with 4 of these half square triangles. Then this is where the instructions get a little bit weird or hard to understand. So let's go through that. You're going to take your block and you're going to lay it upside down. Then you're going to take your quilter's magic wand again and line up that center line from point to point and draw a line. Do this side and then over, and it just moved a little bit there, and then this side. Okay? The next thing I'm going to do is take and trim that down the center. Just like this, right from point to point. I know, this is very strange. Now you're going to take these and trim these down to size. She uses the Tucker trimmer. I like to use my Quilt in a Day ruler. I'm going to trim this down to 4.5, so I'm going to take the dashed line that says 4.5. I'm going to line it up with the line that I drew and the seam. See how that seam goes right through the center of your block up to that's going to go right up to your point, and there's a straight line going right straight through that ruler as well. So I line up the dashed line along the line that I drew and the center line along my seam line, and I'm going to trim these down to 4.5. When you get finished with this, you're going to end up with a right and a left. And you don't have to worry about that right now. It's just automatically going to happen that way. So dotted line along the line that you drew, center line along your seam line, and trim. And you're going to end up with, let's see, you're going to end up with 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Well, let's see. No, you're going to end up with 8. Alrighty, so you'll end up with 8 lefts and 8 rights. See how they're not exactly the same? One is left and one is right. So you'll end up with 4 that look like this and 4 that look like that. And that's all you have to do for month 6. Isn't that exciting? I know. Easy peasy. Have at it and have fun. Next, we're going to work on month 7. So you have everything cut, and we're going to get ready and start stitching. The first step for block number 7 or month number 7 is to sew your strips together. So you're just going to sew all of these together. You have 4 of them. So you're going to sew them together, right sides together at 1/4 inch, and then you're going to press towards the purple on all of them. Once you've done that, then you're going to take them and layer one on top of the other. And you can see that I have a purple up against a green and the purple stripe up against the green. And once you've pressed towards the purple on both of these sides, these 2 strips will nest very nicely together. I usually kind of nest them and press them, and that steam and the heat kind of makes them stick together as I'm cutting my little strips. So now you're going to subcut these. If you cut your strips at 2 1/8, you will cut a 2 1/8 inch subcut. If you cut these at 2 1/4, you'll do a 2 1/4 inch subcut. If you cut these at 2 1/2, then go to 2 1/2 inch. And you're going to cut 40 of these, because in the end you're going to need 40 of these little squares, of these little 4 patches. So come along. I sewed mine cut them at 2 1/4. So I'm just going to start and subcut these at 2 1/4. I like to line up the white line on my little ruler. This is a 3.5 by 6.5 inch ruler. It's a great ruler for this size. I can really hold on to it, and I can line up my 2 1/4 inch line coming down here with my white line going across my seam line there. So I kind of have 2 points kind of squaring all of that off. Then I make my cut, and I'll go all the way along and cut 40 of these. So line it up at my 2 1/4 again. Here's my 2 1/4 inch line. Here's my white line lining up with my seam line. After you've cut 40 of these, you're going to go over to the sewing machine and sew them together at 1/4 inch. So that when you open them up, you have this beautiful, if I could open it up, that'd be great. There we go. You have a beautiful 4 patch. So before you press this, what you want to do is flip the seams. And she says something about ripping these stitches out, tearing these stitches out so that you could fold these going 2 different directions. So really all you need to do is just take your fingers and kind of move these, and it opens that seam up and pushes one going down one direction, one going down the other, and you end up with this almost like little pinwheel effect in the center, or a little 4 square in the center. So let me show you how to do that again. So there's our closed up. People have a lot of trouble with this, but once you get it, it's really easy and fast to do. So my seam is up straight. I'm just going to put my thumbs on either side of my seam and just kind of do a little twist, and it pops it open. And what that does is it makes a nice flat point right in the middle. So then you're going to give it a press, and now we're going to trim it down. We are going to use our squared ruler to trim it down. So you can kind of see how that looks in the back Really, really pretty, nice seam in the back, nice and flat point in the center where those four seams meet. This ruler I thought was, it's awesome, and it's easy to get your squares all cut, but I found these lines a little difficult to read. So what we're going to do is cut down our 4-patch, and we're going to cut it down to a 4-inch finished block. So that's the line that you're going to look at. But each one of these lines has a kind of a mark here and here. Those two marks are going to line up with your seam that kind of cuts this in half. And if you follow that up, there's another line up here and another line over here, which I think is a little bit hard to read, but they all line up really nicely when you lay it down on your block. You might want to get your arrows out. I don't have any arrows here. I think they're at the store. And put arrows at those little points that you want to line up on your block. So when I lay this down, I found the easiest way to lay this down, I'm going to have to move this out of the way so I can cut through it, but the easiest way for me to kind of get things lined up right away is to look at the center mark on the 4-inch finished block line and the diagonal line. So that diagonal line goes like straight through the center point, and then I would line up this 4-inch line on my seam line, and once I got that and that lined up, most everything else lined up. So now I can see there's a little mark, there's a little mark, and the other little mark. So I might just kind of move that just a smidge to get that all lined up correctly. Then I'm going to cut this side. Then I'm going to flip my block. You don't have to move the ruler, just flip your block, and then line up that 4-inch finished block line along the edge that you just cut, and you'll see there's my lines that line up really nice there. My lines line up right on my seam there, and I will trim the other side. So that gets that right to the exact size that you need for the middle of your square in a square. So you're going to go through and cut 40 of these. Once you've done that, then you're going to start adding your triangles. So I took my triangles and I do 2 sides first, 2 opposing sides. I take a triangle and I fold it in half and put a tick mark in the center. That little tick mark is going to line up with my seam line. And I'm going to sew 1/4 inch here. And so I would sew all of them onto this side and then kind of press them, and then come along and fold my triangle again, put a little tick mark, and then sew the next side at 1/4 inch. And then when you press them, you will press toward your triangle, okay, toward the white. So you'll have those 2 sides put on. Then I will come back and repeat with the next side. So I have these 2 sides pressed and on. Now I've done the same thing with this side. I will fold this in half, put a tick mark, and line it up with my seam line, put these 2 sides on, and give it a press. Alrighty, that's all you really need to do. It kind of goes pretty quickly, especially since you can kind of chain stitch all of these and stitch them through all at once. So now you can see that this block needs to be squared up as well. You have more than 1/4 inch from these points to the edge of your fabric. You have these little dog ears sticking out. You don't have to take time and trim that off because we're going to do all that trimming right now. It's so exciting. So this is going to really turn out cool. Now you're going to use another part of the squared ruler. You're not going to use the edge with all of these little X's and numbers. So we're making a 4-inch finished block. So we're going to look at all the little X's with the 4. Looks a little confusing, but as soon as you lay it down on your block, you're going to see exactly how this is going to work. I'm going to take this and I'm going to line up those little X's with the little points on my 4 patch. Those are going to line up right with the seam line of my 4 patch. Isn't that cool? Now I'm going to take and trim the 2 sides on the right and on the top. Leave your ruler, don't do anything with that. Turn your block, and now you can line up this 4.5-inch line right with this. Or look again to your 4-inch X's. Those again will line up right on those little points. You're going to trim on the right side and along the top. Ta-da! And you have a beautiful square and a square block. You can see how you've got 1/4 inch from these points to the edge of your fabric each and every time. So you're going to make 40 of these, and then next month we're going to do our final blocks. The month after, we're going to put everything together. So you're almost there, you're almost done, you've got this. Everything hopefully is turning out beautifully. The girls are having a lot of fun in class and learning a lot, and I hope you are too. If you have any questions on this block or block 6, 6, and 7, you know how to get a hold of me, and have fun with these because these were really fun to do. It seems like a lot when you're starting to cut the 160 triangles, but they go on really quick and it turns out really nice. So we will see you again next month. Have fun. Happy sewing!